Mr. President, I rise today to talk about the unwinnable war in Ukraine, which has already cost American taxpayers billions of dollars. Now, anyone who dares question the uniparty's narrative on the war in Ukraine is obviously going to get criticized. That's okay. The media has been complicit in pushing this narrative. Think about, when was the last time you saw live footage on the ground in Ukraine? It's rare because Ukraine is losing and is losing badly. I'm going to review a few undeniable facts about NATO's history, but these are the facts, and that's what we have to go by, and we can't shy away from them. NATO was formed 75 years ago in 1949 as a defensive alliance, even though in 1991 we agreed to no more eastward expansion. We broke the agreement. We, NATO, and the United States. NATO has expanded eastward 7 times since that agreement in 1991. The bulk of this expansion happened before Russia annexed Crimea and invaded part of Ukraine in 2014. Again, these are all the facts. All play a part in the NATO story and Russia's response to it. Here's another fact. NATO's expansion was on NATO's terms, separate and apart from any Russian input or activity. Let me read that again. NATO's expansion was on NATO's terms, separate and apart from any Russian input or activity, contrary to Secretary Austin's claims. Ask yourself, how would the U.S. react if China or Russia entered a mutual defense organization with Mexico or Canada? How would we react? What if they started basing troops or participating in military exercises just miles from our homeland? First, how far are we willing to take this proxy war with Russia? How far are we? Did we think about that before we got into this? What happens if it turns against Ukraine and Russia starts making real gains, as it appears is happening today? Since the Russian offensive began, we have sent more than $174 billion taxpayer dollars to Ukraine, one of the most corrupt countries in the world. So after all that, after the last 2.5 years of funding billions of taxpayer dollars, getting hundreds of thousands of people killed, what do we have to show for it? The war has only gotten worse. Hundreds of thousands are dead. Ukraine is becoming more desperate as its forces are engineering widespread insubordination and even mass desertion. We don't hear that on TV. We don't hear that in this propaganda media. Over 6 million Ukrainians have fled the country, have left their country. Ukraine is playing with fire. This administration never considered the consequences of Ukraine losing. How can that ever happen? This is really sad. It's sad for the United States of America. It's sad for the taxpayers. It's sad for our military. It's sad for our allies, and it's sad for NATO. Russia now has pounced on Ukraine. Whatever you hear in the media is not true. We are on the cusp of a nuclear war. Nobody seems concerned. It won't happen. Yes, it will happen. Putin has told us it will happen if you continue this. This would only escalate this conflict to an entirely new level that none of us can ever imagine. Do you think this offensive would convince Putin to come to the table and negotiate a peace agreement? Well, I would hope we would go, but we do not seem to want to make a peace agreement. We had better, and we better do it in the very near future. This will provoke him to even more deadly weapons if we continue to attack within their borders, costing more and more lives. NATO and the U.S. would be forced to respond as a result. We're trying to create a war. We must consider these questions thoroughly before we involve ourselves in another one of these crazy conflicts that should never happen. Improvising won't cut it. Now is the time for the U.S. to lead and negotiate a peace to the end of this bloody war. I keep hearing people say, well, we're building equipment for our military. Yeah, right. Or men and women are not losing their lives. We're getting close to it. We're getting very close. It's about this administration's funding a proxy war with no plan, zero, no plan on how to stop it or how to win it. The Biden-Harris administration needs to negotiate a peace agreement now, immediately, or there will be huge, disastrous consequences coming in the very near future. Mr. President, I yield the floor.